Hello, everyone. It is Al Colleen and Stacy Harding coming to you with another edition of Fourth Level Conversations. We're excited to be with you today. It happens to be the 7th of April as we're recording this, and we were watching the events over the last week, particularly for those who have equities that they've invested in or their 401ks, and just what emotional response we might all be having that might change our intellect towards it, maybe in an unhealthy way, but maybe also if we think differently in a healthy way. So, Al, great to be with you, and I'm excited for our conversation.
I am too, but I'm just so afraid, Stacy.
You are?
No, but I was. Oh, maybe not that demonstrative. So yes, I'm. It's great to be with you, Stace, and I think this is going to be an important podcast that maybe you'll have more people wanting to start to tune in these podcasts because today's is a very pragmatic, close to home topic. Stacy and I often talk about big picture things that tend to be life in scope and spirit in scope and whatnot. Today we're going to talk about some of that, but this last week in particular, with what's gone on in the stock market, has been a tremendous opportunity to provide a contrast between level 3 and level 4 identity and belief systems. And I think, there's a whole bunch we're going to talk about here, but what I'd like to at least briefly start with is last week when the stock market started going down, I could feel myself saying, "Oh my God, it's never gone down that much a day. Oh my gosh, again, right?" And I found myself going into that place of it's funny, it's like I look at the stock market. I'm not going to spend the money anytime soon, but I look at it and it tends to days it's up. I feel a little happier. I feel better. I feel safer. And so I looked at my reaction. I realized I've spent a lifetime losing money in the stock market by trying to time the market. And you always hear, don't time the market. Well, we think timing the market is try to just buy low, sell high. But timing the market is basically, and this is where I think day trading is incredibly dangerous. And yet a lot of people try to make a living on it because you're really betting on the emotions of the moment with people based upon whatever news is predominant out there. And, so Trump passed the tariffs and, didn't know what that meant. Didn't really know tariffs that much in terms of their impact. And so I assumed, well, it's going to start an international trade war and the stock market's going to crash. The world economy is going to crash. That all this negative stuff. And my oldest son, who is a macroeconomist and a certified financial analyst, sent me a podcast. Now, true confessions, folks. One of the things that's funny about podcasts is I don't like to listen to podcasts. I like when Stacy and I do them because I love Stacy and love you guys, and hopefully we talk about something that's of interest to you. But I find it hard to make it through a lot of podcasts because I feel like 45 years ago there was a movie called My Dinner with Andre, and it was just about two guys sitting at dinner having a conversation. It got all these great reviews, and it was the most boring 2 hours of my life because I don't generally find it that interesting to watch two other people talk to each other. But what my wife told me and others have told me as well, don't think about it as two people talking to each other. Think about the information they're providing. And if you do that, so I've listened to a few Rogans and all, I realize that's a better way of looking at it. So he sends me this podcast, and I'm going to tell you what it is because everybody who watches this, I put it up on my Facebook on the Level 4 Integrated Mastery Tribe page. I've sent it to people, but this is incredibly important that you all check out this podcast. It's it's called Howard Lutnick, All in DC, with Klamath, Jason Sachs, and Friedberg, March 19th, 2025. Now, I didn't know who Howard Lutnick was. Did you know, Stace?
No.
So Howard Lutnick, we all hear that Elon is running Doge and doing all these things. Howard Lutnick is the guy that created Doge with Elon Musk. But going back before that, he's a New York guy, Jewish dude, very successful, very well off. He has a major, I think, bank or investment company. He had the top 3 floors of the World Trade Center. 9/11, he lost 700 of his employees. He lost 80% of his workforce. His business was wiped out, and all these beloved people were wiped out. So he was wiped out, and he had to kind of rebuild from there, which he did. But one of the things I first was attracted to in listening to this podcast was that he said our first order of business is to take care of other human beings. And so the first thing he did was take care of all the families that lost people, even when he didn't have the resources he once had. But he goes on in this podcast that is absolutely mind blowing. Anybody that doesn't have it, reach out to me and I'll send you the link. And he talks about how he's been friends with Trump for 40 years now, before I go any farther. These days, Trump is a dog whistle, and people have a lot of beliefs strong, either pro or con for Trump. I'd ask you, as you listen to the podcast with Letnick and you listen to our podcast today, would you put on the shelf whatever you think of Trump, good or bad, and just get the information to see if it doesn't adjust the way you look at things? So, I didn't know what Trump was doing. And last week, I'm like, what's he trying to do? Trash the world economy and all that. So Lutnick comes on and gives a history lesson about really how we got here with the tariffs that we have. He does a lot of things. He talks about Doge, he talks about tariffs and all that. Well, he talks about with tariffs, Stacy, something I didn't realize is that after World War II, so 1946 and on, we had won, and we were, the United States was like 90% of the world production after World War II because everybody else's factories got knocked down, basically. And so we're living kind of in an island of being solvent and successful. And what we did as a government was we encouraged other countries to raise tariffs on our goods to make more money, and we kept ours low to help them rebuild. So we rebuilt the world after World War II using tariffs that were benevolent to other countries, not us. But it never got stopped because too many people were benefiting from it economically. And that's really what he's doing, is he's rebalancing that. A. B, he is essentially making this now, I didn't realize that America is the consumer for the world. We buy stuff from everybody, and they can't afford to have us decide to cut off buying. I saw where Mexico, I think it was, has about a 32 or 3% of their GDP are exports to America. Canada is like 22%. Our exports to other countries as a comparison to our GDP is like 1.7%. So they need our consumption more than we need their consumption of our goods. We have that issue. We have the fact that the middle class in America has been decimated. This is going to get to the stock market, folks. I'm going to let you listen to the podcast, but the middle class has been decimated. And a lot of it is that a lot of folks don't necessarily have advanced education. They are often blue collar folks that get middle class, and yet it's harder and harder for those folks to really find a way to make a living and support their families as they have a right to and as we want them to be able to. So he's trying to do that. Anyway, he goes into a whole bunch about why the tariffs aren't to be afraid of. And then he talks about the stock market, and he talks about the gold card, which you may have heard of. I haven't, but here's my message for what we're here to talk about today is this is a level 3-4 thing, because from level 3, our fear takes over out of our survival instinct, and we automatically narrow to the moment. And from that moment, we speculate worst case scenarios and try to protect ourselves from worst case scenarios. You could say it's a natural biological phenomenon of survival, but we have to override that. That, I would say, is a level 3 response. It's virtually animalistic, defensive. But we have an option of a level 4 response that says, if I get more information that's objective, valid information, not polemics, not left side, right side spin, but valid, objective information, and we expand our context of perspective, both in terms of time and context, it changes things. And I promise you, folks, and I'll shut up and let you get a word in edgewise, Stace, driving back from Florida to our place in Tennessee, I listened to this podcast, and in that 2-hour drive, I shifted from fear to unbelievable optimism about the future for our children and our grandchildren. Does it ever bother any of you to think that, us old folks, boomers, we're going to be fine, but what about our kids? Oh, they'll be fine. Well, how do we know that? Especially given all the crazy stuff going on in society and the economy and all that, and much less our grandchildren. You listen to this podcast and you're going to get a glimpse of how the future for our country and for the world is going to be brighter than ever. And that's what's happening in Washington right now with Doge and with all these steps that people are spinning however they're spinning them. But I'm more optimistic now about the future after I'm no longer here than I have been in 30 years, Stace. What do you think about
Well,
what's
that's a phenomenal perspective. And I know you shared with me yesterday about this podcast and the enthusiasm and excitement you've had about the perception that it's led you to regarding what's going on right now. And I often think so much we instead of using our intellect along with our heart and our values, we tend to react based on just emotions, back to level 3 reaction, right? And so regardless of what your political views are, whether you're in the middle, you're left or right, here's the truth about it all in the history of our country. No side has ever gotten it all right, and no side has ever gotten it all wrong either.
right?
And we're in those times where the current administration is not going to get it all right, and they're not going to get it all wrong. But it's how we perceive the progress towards the greater good of not only our country but of mankind. Because if this tariff approach does the rebalancing that you've just described, Al, the world's going to be better for it. It doesn't mean that we're going to stop providing goods to other nations and stop helping them create their own wealth and security, but it rebalances that. And by the way, all of that over the course of time has been on the backs of middle Americans, right? And we have seen some great resources. And I still have children that are in that range of 27, 28 to 35, and it is tougher for them today than it was for me. They haven't had the same opportunity to buy homes and to begin to build kind of a nest egg towards retirement. So we're not financial advisors, and so we're not telling you what to do with your investments, but we are saying this. If you take a look at the history of times like this, where you've seen a dramatic drop in a very quick fashion in equities, stock market, et cetera, history would tell us don't panic. Don't think of it as level 3. The great Warren Buffett, when he was faced with things like this, would say, well, I haven't lost any money. I didn't sell anything.
Right.
My paper changed and the value on my paper changed. And when it's way up and I haven't sold it, I haven't made any money either. It's just gains on paper. So now if you're at retirement age or you're nearing that, we would understand having concern about the value of those equities and so forth. And so hopefully you've got a really good financial advisor that if you're in those stages, you will probably have begun to bleed out of the equity positions and have some more stable investments for your retirement years. But if you've got a longer horizon, and really what we mean by that is more than a year, more than 2 or 3 years, this is a great opportunity. There are a lot of people that would say that the market has been overvalued for the last couple of years. We were talking earlier, Al, that the way you evaluate that maybe is changing because of technology and AI and the curves and all that go along with that in comparison to the way we've measured the value of the market in the past. But nonetheless, things are on sale at the moment. So if you have a position of cash where you think that I've got a longer term window, if you historically look, every financial advisor will say, look at the history of equities over a longer period of time, and over 100 years, a 10, 11% yield over that time frame. Now, I'm not expecting all of us to wait 100 years to get that 10%, but it's in shorter windows, it's equally been that or better, actually. I was sharing with Al earlier that we've gone through, in my lifetime of investments, we've gone through 2007, 2008, right? Call it the mortgage meltdown. We've gone through COVID. I fortunately didn't follow the crowd when everybody was selling out of panic or level 3 thinking. I didn't. I said, I don't need this cash now to live. And so I left it alone. And out of every one of those cycles, not only were the losses regained, but I was in a position to grow on the foundation I had purchased at a lower position than I would have when the market recovered. And so the same was true with COVID. I know friends that literally sold out of every equity as COVID began and saying, I'm going to a cash position. Well, they got to pay capital gains taxes, and then they had to figure out the timing again. Now, when do I get back? And hopefully I can get back from where my position was. So again, seek your own financial advice. But our opinion is this is an opportunity to think about how you think about the world. Finances is a big part of our life, right? There are other things that we have to think with a level 4 values-based perception if we want to live the highest quality of life. And I think that what we're going through is an opportunity for not only this country to get better, but for the world to get better. So I don't know all the details, Al, like the more seasoned people on these issues are, but I've had the same approach that you are, is that I'm not panicked about this. I might also not watch it every day because that could impact, just like getting bad news, right? Could impact my psyche. But at the same time, is this an opportunity to show your faith and trust in the world, and show your faith in God, and the fact that you can trust that the future is going to be better than today is? Let's let you continue.
About a year and a half ago, well, first of all, let me confess that 44 years ago, I became a stockbroker for 3 years in between my mortgage career. The Volcker years, 18% interest rates, I went and became a stockbroker. So I understand, I got the licenses and all that jazz. So you wouldn't think I'd be as incredibly stupid as I've been with investments for decades. I have been. I'm the guy in 99 that's selling at the top. I'm selling at the bottom when Microsoft is tanking, only to watch it catapult. So I went to my son, my oldest son, a year and a half ago, and he is, I don't know if folks know what a certified financial advisor is, but it's an accreditation that takes 3 tests over no less than 3 years, and it has a 50% washout rate from the first test. About 20% of the people that try to take this test, you can only take one a year, make it through. The first time he made it through. He's a real sharp kid, 37. I don't know which kid he is. And so I went to him a year and a half ago and said, okay, son, let me just admit to you what maybe every parent ultimately has to admit to their children. I'm a loser and I can learn from you because I have a bad relationship with the stock market. I play it too safe or I speculate too much. Just tell me what to do, and whatever it is, I'll do it. And he said, okay, now this is a guy, I probably shouldn't say his name because he calls on financial advisors and talks them into doing things. This is the guy that said, there's nothing that can beat the S&P 500 over time. We can tell people, try this, try that. But if you look at the S&P 500 for the last 100 years, it averages 10 to 11%. Now, you're going to have some years like 2000 to 2004 where it's going to be flat, but then it'll go up 20% for several years. So what you do, and if you were a pure robot, you just put everything in the S&P 500 ETF, Fidelity, Schwab, someplace with a low management rate, and forget about it. Right. But we're not robots. We have emotions, and we're going to get, the stock market does this. It's big teeth. And when it's doing these guys, we freak out emotionally. So that's why you have bonds in there. And so he set me up basically on about a 60% S&P 500, 30% bonds, 5% crypto in the form of the Bitcoin ETF, IBIT, and 5% in Berkshire Hathaway. And it's been surprising what that has done as far as rebalancing things. But even with that, it's been amazing how things have gone since and I don't worry about it as much because I'm not trying to pick this or that stock you're getting wrong. Now let's talk about what actually is your opportunity watching this podcast with your household money and your investments. To Stacy's very wise point, if you have immediate need, well, hopefully you've recognized you're going to have immediate need, and we all are going to have some of that. So my wife and I have some of our capital in taxable accounts and money markets that we could tap into. But for the long term, IRAs and things like that, realistically, unless you have to live on that, I'm still working. But if you have to live on that, it's a different formula. But if you have to do RMDs, required minimum distributions, you got 4%-ish a year of what you got to take out of that money. And, because they figure out how long you're going to live, and you got to start taking them at 73. So what I've really realized over the last 36 hours listening to this podcast was I was afraid. Why was I afraid? The market lost 100 grand in my account in 2 days, and it scared me. What was my thinking? My thinking was, yeah, but if it keeps going, it's going to go to zero, right? It's never gone to zero. Even the 29 crash, it didn't go to zero. Yeah, but you're losing a bunch. You are losing a bunch, but the only way you ultimately lock in that loss is Stacy's earlier point and Buffett's earlier point. You haven't lost anything unless you sell. So even that begins a new way of looking at it. Is it's losses and gains on paper. You notice how when you have great days and the market's up, you feel richer, you feel safer. Well, you aren't any safer if you don't sell and you don't take the money. So what I've realized in the last 36 hours, learning what I learned from this podcast, the Howard Lufkin thing, is this is a matter of scope of perspective, like so much of what Stacy and I talk about. If you stretch your scope perspective out over time, you will begin to see a bigger picture that will have better information that will allow you to make more lucid and objective decisions rather than thinking emotionally and scrapping at the window of fear. So, for example, I don't understand tariffs. So in this podcast, what Lufkin lays out is something I never knew, and I'm an historian by training. I didn't know this. What he said was, and I was sharing this with you, Stace, right before the podcast, that after World War II, America was really the last man standing. We had a healthy economy, and we were like 90% of the world's productive economy because everybody else's factories got knocked down all over, right? So what we did, this is why whatever our problems, America is a good entity, and I think it serves good in the world. We decided to rebuild the world. And the way we did that was we encouraged other countries to have high tariffs on us, and we'd have low tariffs on them. So they could benefit from our consumption, because we are 90% of the world's consumption. Seems like that's an exaggeration, but we're a huge percentage. We did that by design in the 40s, and we never touched it. The 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. It's all these years it's gone on. Well, what's the result been? NAFTA and all these things came in where we're going to, companies are going to save money building cars in Mexico. That's great for the people that are shareholders of that company. But what about the middle class in this country? What about the farmers? What about the industry workers, the production line workers, the poor guy that grows up in some little town in Pennsylvania that makes it to the 12th grade and he's planning on going to work at the factory and working there for 30 years and having a wife and children and building a family? That was the American dream that lasted most of the American time until the last 20, 30 years, where we allowed corporate interests to say it's cheaper over there. Let me build it over there, and then we'll buy it from over there, and then we will make more money as a company. But as a country, it's devastated the middle class. So one of the first light bulbs that went off when he was talking about tariffs was all that's happening with the tariffs is we're now over that policy of continuing to build the world at our expense. So we're rebalancing things. Now, I think I saw yesterday where something like 52 countries have reached out to the White House to have negotiations. And so this isn't a right wrong thing. This is an economics thing. And I'll admit, I'm not a macroeconomist, but this guy will give you a master's degree in macroeconomics in 2 hours. And I promise when you're done with it, I put it up on Facebook. I'm getting comments like, wow, I didn't know that. Unbelievable. It will instantly shift you from fear and not just to neutral, but to optimism. Because, folks, the plan is not just to balance this year's budget so we don't have a deficit. It is to eliminate the deficit, 36 trillion or whatever it is. Now, let's talk briefly about 36 trillion and stay sorry about running on like that. But the 36 trillion, I don't know how you think about that, but that's a big number. I think of it as a credit card that we've overextended 36 trillion. We're doomed. How are we even still in business, right? Here's a little piece that I didn't know. Lufkin, who's a businessman, genius, like Musk, he basically said, do you know what the balance sheet is for the United States of America? Now he's thinking like a business CEO, like 550 trillion. It's dramatically higher than the deficit. We never hear that number. And therefore, we really aren't in trouble. It's a big deficit. We've got to get a handle on before it gets any further. And it's bred to all sorts of corruption and, people receiving Social Security for 100 years when they've been dead for all that. Right. But I believe, honestly, after listening to this, if they can pull it off, this is more than just we're going to be okay, are problems that could very much lead to world wars, social strife, could lead to a complete breakdown of humanity if we didn't get control of it. Somebody the grown-ups had to get back in charge, I guess I'll put it, that had to basically look at this big picture and say, it's not enough to just put a band-aid on today. We've got to solve it permanently. Folks, that is what they are trying to do. Now, can we trust that they're going to do it? Well, how they went about picking the people that are going to work on this, mind-blowing. They had something like 36 candidates for every cabinet position, and they sat in a room with their brain trust, Trump and Musk and everybody, and they whittled it down to 18, to 9, to 3, to 2. They flew the 2 out, they interviewed them, and they picked the best one for like 30 positions. He said, this is the most unbelievable brain trust at the top of the government we've ever had. We've got the very best people in the very best areas, in the very best roles that know what they're doing. So I wanted to talk to you about it today, Stace, and to anybody watching this podcast, that isn't it interesting how easy it is, even though I think about this every day, I talk to people every day, how easy it is to fall into level 3, but simply with more and better information and an expanded context, how it can change your perspective to optimism from fear. What are your thoughts, brother?
Well, you were saying a few things there, Al, that really resonated with me as particularly think about the economy and politics, and they are tied together a lot. And I was thinking about that someone might watch this and have some perception that you and I are committed to a particular view or party. And the reality is that what I think we're trying to share is a vision of hope for a better future, irrespective of the players that might be contemplating that. So if it was the other side doing these things, that if you use your logical brain, eliminating the runaway waste that's in our government, eliminating the deficit that could be problematic in the future, making America stronger in every case with particular focus on the middle class, certainly a strong military. I wouldn't care what the initial of the party was doing that. That would have my support. And so if you're thinking that this was some attempt for us to persuade you politically, it's not. What we're trying to persuade you is to think optimistically about our future and to not see this time of correction as something to panic over, that the world's coming to an end or that the economy of this great nation is in trouble because the stock market has had a downward trend for 3 or 4 straight days. That isn't a measurement of the true economy. It's the measurement of perception of people thinking about the immediate future for companies and their costs and their labor. It has nothing to do with the long-term viability of the country. So please don't just fall into that. This is an opportunity for you to stop and think, how do I think about this? And how can I carry this over to the other areas of my life? Do I panic when something doesn't go exactly like I had expected? Al, you shared this with me a lot, and I'm learning it more and more. Most of the way that I expect things to turn out to rarely do the way I expected them to. Rarely. Whether I'm playing golf and trying to get a score, whether it's relationships, whether it's the economy, whether it's business growth, whether it's my discipline around my health, whatever, oftentimes it doesn't turn out the way I was expecting it. And a lot of times that's good because I was limiting my expectations. Instead of thinking, you know what, if I could just surrender my preconceptions about what that means for me, and I could take a look at with an optimistic lens of what could I gain from this? What could I learn? And I'm looking at the stock market that way right now. I'm looking at going, okay, well, it's been volatile. What did you expect? Did we expect it to just be consistently going up day after day so we could feel better? And we can look and say, wow, if I sold everything today, look what I'd have. I'll tell you a real brief story. This is not a knock on anybody that I work with, but this last year, I had an investment that I had not contemplated selling. And my partner that I work with on this thought that I had, and we sold it. And I got a nice large capital gain to pay taxes on for 2024. unbeknownst to me. And I was kind of distraught at the moment, going, oh my gosh, look how much of this I'm going to pay taxes on. Well, I locked in about a 300% gain on the investment, and I'm going to give away 10, 15% of it. So it's like my perception changed, like, okay, I really did sell it at a gain. Darn. How shameful that I actually experienced a profitable gain and I have to pay taxes on it. So it's all perspective, right? And it's like I could have left that there. And right now, that same investment, had I not sold it, and it was valued today, it'd be less than the taxes that I'm paying on it. So it's oftentimes just about our perception of things. And you often use this language, Al, that everything's just right and perfect as it is. And the reality is, I think this is part of it too. And we live in a giant universe that does work out for our good. I think there's a God behind that personally, and I'm just not fearful. And that's what we want people who are watching this is every area of your life, including your stocks. Don't be fearful. It doesn't mean you don't use your mind and you use good advice and counsel and wisdom. Hopefully you've gotten a little of that from our time together today. But you are in a position to control your perceptions if you'll just maybe observe what's going on instead of judging it.
Yeah, you mentioned something in there. If I look at the American society today, I think the most dangerous thing and the thing that makes me saddest is not what's going on with the economy. It's really political polemics.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have whole industries committed to creating fanatics on both sides of the aisle. And the risk of that feels tragic to me is we stop listening to information that isn't in agreement with what we're being programmed to believe is singularly true. And so, and we tend to put people into camps. Oh, you're just a Trumper, or you're just a Hillaryer, or whatever it is. And as if everything you then have to say no longer matters.
Right.
When you do that, you're really losing the power of objectivity. So my opinion and advice would be to let go of the polemics of what you think about who you think your enemy is. Let go of all that. Do not trust the news.
Mm-hmm.
Because we all watch news sources that tend to reinforce our level 3 story to help us feel safe. And therefore, so-and-so is bad. Think about the elections. They're less about the quality of the candidate than who they aren't.
Mm-hmm.
We vote too much for who we hate rather than who we are inspired by and want to follow. Mm-hmm. That's very dangerous. Because what are we teaching our children? Very narrow. I've got friends that don't want to talk to me anymore because they put me in a box that I'm not on their side of the aisle. That's tragic to me because when you start, if you did that inside your family, that so-and-so thinks this way and therefore I hate them, and you associate it with all this stuff you've been programmed to think is true of anybody on that side of the aisle, you give away access to information that can make your life better. I'm reading a bunch of books right now, but this is one I don't know if I talked about this last time we did a podcast, but this is a really, really good book by a Buddhist nun named Pema Chodron called How We Live is How We Die. And she has fascinating information. I only allow myself one chapter a day because they're so good. There's so much good stuff in it. But she says that basically our fear of that, first of all, what it will be like when you go through the experience of death, you can predict now based upon your relationship with your reaction to two things. When you lose control, because the ego lives on the illusion of control, and when you lose something you're attached to that you're treating as it's permanent. In other words, her biggest wisdom is nothing is permanent except that, and you don't have any control. You have influence. And if you can learn to flow with those things, then you don't have to fear death because you'll flow with whatever new experience death happens to be. Mm-hmm. Now, personal confession, my level 3 tendency is to react with anger out of fear. When something happens I didn't expect, I get angry because I have this outrageous premise it shouldn't have happened. What, life? I mean, it's just the way things are. So it was a wonderful insight because it makes me realize, Al, if you want to go through the veil of death, whenever that day comes, whenever God decides it's time for Al, you can go through it qualitatively or in a panic, and you can predict how that's going to be based upon how well you are able to flow with surprises, even surprises that your mind is tempted to think as dark surprises. Stace, you're a guy that I've known for 35 years, but only really known for 2.
Yeah.
And you are 180 degrees different than my petty little mind was putting the box I was putting you in. You're so much larger than I was allowing you in my mind, which is one thing I'm really grateful for, having gotten to know you in that time, because your scope of character and wisdom is so much greater than the little box I was putting you in. So what you and I are trying to do with these podcasts is simply to do good in the world. We aren't here to convince people to vote one way or the other, or to go get this or that job, or, we're not doing that. We're talking about life stuff that everybody deals with. And as we close out this session today, I hope people heard something in here that has them just pause with what you feel as unassailable, in terms of something you feel passionately emotional about, particularly if it's negative about other people and their belief systems. Everybody out there is a reflection of God in my mind. We're all souls. And these conversations are about what it is to be a fully optimized human being, beyond however society is increasingly getting effective at programming you into limiting your identity, and with it, who's with you and who's against you. Stace, close it out for us,
Yeah,
brother.
I wanted to comment. I was thinking about, what if everyone did think alike? I think about, there's dangers in the world today. That would be really dangerous. So I want to invite people, just to conclude on what Al was talking about there, invite people who think differently than you into conversation, not to debate. I think that's what we want to do, is get in there and debate and let me show you how you should change your mind. It's not that. Invite them into conversation so that you can make sure you're being sharpened.
Nice.
Not asking anybody to change your views or your values, not that, but it'll make you appreciate your values more. And if you can do that, if you can invite people in with different opinions, and you can have an honest level 4 conversation about anything, the stock market like we are today, politics, anything, but you can invite that conversation in such a way that I want to demonstrate to you that I respect you as my fellow human being, even though you think differently. And I'm going to thank you for thinking differently, because you're going to keep me honest on what I believe in. And I'm not going to try to change your mind. Let's have some good discussion. Then what happens, Al, and you talk to me about this in my relationships that I need to heal and take deeper. Oftentimes we just don't have enough information about the other person.
Yeah.
And I'm learning that my job is to gather information so that I can be to them what I want to be to the world, which is a positive impact of influence, because I can't control it.
Amen. I mean, it's our emotional mind, out of our level 3 ego, operates on limited information that it is compressed into a polemic dogma.
Yeah.
And in that stage, you're really helpless, because you're really just trying to satisfy your emotional passion that is often based on too small of a scope of data, of information. So
Right.
we can learn from everybody. And
Sure.
I actually wrote a little bit about this morning on one of my Facebook posts, that our ego tends to react quickly and emotionally in the moment based on what it already knows. But our level 4 pauses and sees a bigger game here, and realizes we're all a temporary expression of a God thought, in my mind. We're here for 80 years or 20 years or whatever, and then out of this dimension. You may think something's after this, you may not, and we'll all find out. But while you're here, while you're watching this podcast, I would have you leave with one last thing. When you start to feel strongly emotionally about anything, particularly if there's a component of negativity or judgment in it about anybody or anything else, ask yourself, do I have enough information? Because Stace, you had a lot of information when you and I met a few years ago, and we spent a couple of days together, and you began judiciously applying that information, the new information, and you're a different guy. today than you were a few years ago, and I'm a different guy than I was 2 years ago or 25 years ago when I started doing this. So we wish everybody who watches this a blessed life. Do it the best you can. Do good unto others, and operate in the spirit that you're not here to judge others. Be indifferent to their judgment of you. Monitor your inner code of honor and integrity and values and love. And if nothing else, realize you may die 5 minutes from now. You want to go out being an expression of love onto the world without finding out if they're worthy of your love because they voted like you did or they have a greater or lesser net worth. All irrelevant in the end. So bless you all. I hope that you have enjoyed something about today's podcast. And Stace, I'll let you close us out, brother.
I can't add anything to that close. That was perfect. And so if you can apply that to others, but apply it to yourself too. If you're judging yourself or you're being hard on yourself, stop and say for a moment, I don't think I have all the information, because you probably aren't thinking of it at that moment. Thank you for watching this. We love doing this. It's really a blessing for Al and I. We hope it is for you too. Have a blessed day.
Bye now.
Bye now.